All right, so what the outputs, oh, there it is. Took a while. All right. So it looks like we do have it. I think we've got it. I'm going to continue as if we've got it. What I'm seeing is a screen
Yep.
there. I don't entirely know what happened with the
Yeah.
output, and hopefully the output's going to stick.
Yep.
All right, perfect. So I was going to say our cup runneth over because we have multiple. So here's the deal, folks. I sincerely apologize. Thank you for joining us here on Overtime. My name is Nick Soutter. I would make the joke about the guy with the hat again, but that's only funny the first time. So we had a show scheduled. We had Nate and Chris Mowdy and Uncivil Law. Well, Mowdy was a drop-in. We asked if Mowdy wanted to come in, and
I'm party crashing tonight.
Yes. We thought we weren't going to be able to get on Civil Law. Then Civil Law was able to come. So we don't have Nate right now. We had troubles getting him in. We exceeded our vMix license for the V calls, but we're going to bring him in on Skype in just a minute. So what I'm going to have everyone do is, if we could have everybody introduce yourself, talk a little bit about your channel and what it is you do, so that for those of you who are new here and don't know these guests, they can start talking about who they are. So on Civil Law, why don't we start with you?
Yes, my name is Uncivil Law, despite what the name says underneath me. But I am a lawyer, and I do legal commentary, legal analysis. Basically, I review Supreme Court decisions, other major court decisions, do legal analysis, try to explain what's happening legally, disappoint people frequently by giving them answers they don't want to hear. That is my channel.
So basically, we could just say your channel is called A Major Disappointment.
Yes, basically, yes.
Okay. It's good. We've had him on before. He's marvelous. We love having him. We're still going to have him on for a discussion on Citizens United, because it's good to see somebody who's intelligent, knows what they're talking about, defending that decision. I think that's a good. I'm a little bit more of the middle. We all know where Ethan lands on that one. So, and Tony just dropped Uncivil Law's channel in on the live chat. So please go check that out. I think you'll like it. He knows what he's talking about, but he's also got you know what? A lot of stuff we do is on the liberal side. It's nice to have someone with a bit more of a conservative bent, just so that we understand who the good guys are and who the bad guys are. So just raises an eyebrow. Okay, Chris, how you doing? Could you tell us about yourself,
Good.
please?
I'm just a bass player, but I like having good conversations. I am the lightweight in the room tonight, so I'm going to be, when things get complicated, I'm probably going to be the one that stops everything and asks you to disentangle the information in bite-sized pieces so that people like me can understand what's going on. I keep up on the news, but I don't have the political science knowledge, foundational knowledge, or underpinnings to like be able to frame it. I have opinions about what's going on in the news, but they're admittedly naive. So I'm hoping that through discussions like this, I'll be able to be a little bit more educated and be informed, be an informed consumer and citizen. So that's me.
All
but
right.
I can vamp. You know, I can just keep talking if you want, Nick. How much time do you need? I can vamp. I can keep going, brother.
I'm still trying to get Nate in here, and we're gonna see if he can come in through Skype. So this is just hey, I'm going to say it's a lot of last minute changes, but the truth is some of this is just my screw up. So we'll see if we can get going. I'd love to have Nate in here, but let's start with, so there's a lot going on. Let's start with the post office. That's the big one. The post office has had a funding problem for a very long time. The post office has been operating at a serious loss, and now Trump appears to have suggested that, especially in particular because he doesn't want mail-in voting, that he is okay with not funding the post office more. At least that sort of appears to be what he said. So I'd like to sort of talk about what he said and why this is an issue. The only other thing, we'll get into the rest later. So on civil law, what's your view on that?
Well, my view is, first of all, the Postal Service is at a very big disadvantage because of some unique requirements in its funding. Most notably, it's required uniquely to pre-fund the pensions for all of its employees for 75 years, employees who haven't even been born yet. So it has to make sure that there's enough money to fund the pensions for employees who haven't even started working. And that obviously puts a huge financial constraint on them. That is a burden that's unlike any other federal program, any other federal agency. So they're in a unique position as a result of that. So there are many problems with the Postal Service, and there are many legitimate criticisms of the Postal Service. There are many funding concerns that are legitimate, but it would be remiss to not note they're under a unique funding scheme that puts them under a unique boot that is problematic. With respect to
and their only income is like sales, right? So postage stamps and anything that they don't actually get taxpayer revenue outside of that, so they have to pay that huge burden. And then is that correct?
They're a government corporation. Yeah, they're a government-owned corporation, which also provides them some unique advantages that's unlike many things, but they have some unique disadvantages too. So, yeah, they have to fund their own way, and it's a problem. I think there are many legitimate concerns to be raised with mail-in voting. I think it was Rhode Island recently that announced, maybe it was a court that announced that they don't need a signature verification. So if a voter wants to mail in a ballot, they don't need anyone to validate that person was actually the one signing it. I mean, those kinds of things raise real problems because you have issues with ballot harvesting. We know Democratic operatives, and I don't know if Republican ones have as well, but I know Democratic operatives have gone around, done ballot harvesting, gone around to collect people's ballots. And what they're doing with those ballots once they collect them, who knows in terms of changing them or otherwise. So there's authenticity and problems with mail-in balloting, at least when you're doing en masse. With absentee ballot, there's been restrictions on how they're done and how they're validated, and some of these they want to pre-mail out ballots to everyone. They want to have people not be able to verify it. There's a lot of legitimate considerations with mail-in balloting, but whatever considerations there are with mail-in balloting, it's not a post service problem. The Postal Service just takes the mail from point A to point B. Whatever the problems are, it's not the Post Service's problems. So the whole thing with the Postal Service is a little bit weird.
Yeah, so it sounds like, and I mean the only pushback I'd offer is, as of yet, the confirmed instances of voter fraud are reasonably small. Now that's not to say that inviting disaster, or inviting people to do more is a good idea, but there are significant penalties for voter fraud as it is, and as of the moment that I'm aware of, there isn't a lot of people who actually commit it. At least that's the argument that I hear from the other side.
Well, that's a fair point, but it's a little bit unfair in one respect. It's saying that there's been a systemic change in what they're proposing. So saying that there's been no problems as of yet is a little bit like in 2008 saying no mortgages fail. Then they changed their criteria for how they were giving mortgages, which is why it led to the whole subprime crisis. Yep. So the whole subprime crisis was based on the fact, well, no mortgages have ever failed. But then they changed their criteria, which led to the mortgages failing. Yes, there's not been widespread problems with mail-in balloting. But when you change the preconditions, you can't operate under the assumption anymore because you've changed the basis for it. So it's a little bit like that to me.
I think that's very fair. I think that's an astute observation and an important one to make, simply because of this unique circumstance where I think now. So Mnuchin, that wasn't Mnuchin. Oh my God, it was what's his name from Dr. Fauci said that there's nothing wrong with voting in person and that it should be perfectly safe so long as proper guidelines are followed. My concern is that there's nothing about this administration that, in my view, reflects, quote, proper guidelines and followed being in the same sentence. So, I see this, and whereas those proper guidelines would make it take much longer to vote because you'd have to clean the surfaces in between voters. Everybody would have to stand 6 feet apart, so the lines would go immensely far back. And I wouldn't have a problem with that if we didn't have courts that were saying, well, you can't extend the voting times. So it seems to me that if we don't make this accommodation at a minimum this one time, and I am not as familiar with the difference between sort of absentee ballots and mail-in voting. So I think you probably have a point there that's gone a bit over my head. But it seems to me that we need to let people vote and let them do it safely. And I don't think in-person voting can be done safely.
Well, that's fair. I mean, voting has some unique challenges to it. We need to ensure authenticity and anonymity at the same time, which is a unique problem. A lot of people will say, well, we have ATMs. Why can't we have online voting? You know, I can go to my bank and log into my bank and I can transfer money or withdraw money. Why can't I have online voting if I can have online banking? Online banking has one big criteria that online voting cannot have, which is reversibility and authenticity. Every step of an online banking transaction, we know who's doing it. Every step is reversible. It can all be rolled back. With voting, you can't do that. It has to be anonymous. So that raises some very unique challenges. And when you're trying to figure out how to do that, it's like, how do you ensure this ballot is from an authorized voter while also ensuring you can't figure out who voted for it? Right? Now,
Yep.
now in real world voting, we figured that problem out, right? Because in real world voting, you go to a place, they check your name off, they give you a physical ballot. But from that moment on, it's untraceable. But there's only one. They've given it to you, and they can watch you. I mean, they can't tell what you're doing with it, but they can see every step of the way, and people can validate it. So you, with your physical ballot, it's now untraceable. You go down there and you fill it out, and if you make a mistake, you can turn it back in. And I've actually had this happen to me personally, where I made a mistake, and I went up to the person's like, I want to spoil my ballot, and they're like, okay. So they mark it out and they put it in a special envelope that everyone can see every step of the way, and they give me a new blank ballot, and then I go and fill it out and I put it into a machine, and it's untraceable to me. With online voting or mail-in voting, it's like, how do you ensure that that voter is coming from an authorized voter who wasn't being coerced, who someone wasn't looking over their shoulder? They're the person who actually filled it out. They didn't, they aren't taking they're taking a photograph of it in order to sell that vote or something like that. I mean, we are paranoid on voting to many, many levels. And with real world voting, we figured a lot of these problems out. Now you're talking about doing mass mail-in voting. It raises a whole host of authenticity validation problems. And I don't think a lot of people are really thinking this through. It's like, how do you make sure this is from a voter? They're the one that's actually voting. They're the one that actually voted for that. They weren't being coerced. They aren't being bribed. It's actually their vote. How do you do that? It's like, we don't know. And so mail-in balloting raises some real issues. But all those issues, being whatever they are, they're not issues with the Postal Service. So as far as I'm concerned, let's fund the Postal Service. We can deal with the problems. Let's take away their requirement they have to pre-fund their pensions, because it's insane. All right? Let's deal with whatever management problems they have. That's fine.
So that was a law from like 2010, where they said that, okay, they have to, I think it was 2010, they said they have to, no, because it was earlier, I think it was 2006 or something. They had to fund all their pensions for 75 years, so that includes, even in some cases, people who haven't been born yet. So take that away, make sure that they're fully funded, make sure that they can deliver the mail. And there's arguments, I think, there's arguments too, like, do we really need to have a public post office? I think that's for another time, because I do want to get to one other issue on the post office to move on. But I think I cut you off, so why don't you finish? I apologize.
No, I think we've had a post office. It's one of the very few things that's actually mentioned explicitly in the Constitution. So, like, we should have a post office. That's cool. No problem with having a post office. I saw someone in chat said, seriously, the country that put a man on the moon can't work this out. It reminds me of a famous quote that says, well, because we can put a man on the moon, surely we can put a man on the sun. It's like, not all problems are, there's a lot of problems, and there's a lot of paranoia. And we solved out a lot of these problems and paranoia. I've done a little bit of volunteering work with voters and being an election observer, sitting in the room all day and watching people vote. So I have a little bit of experience, not a lot of experience. But I mean, it's paranoia. There's people there from both parties. Everyone can watch everyone else. Everyone can watch what everyone's doing. Everyone watches as the thing is being sealed up. Everyone watches as the ballots are being counted up. There's paranoia at every step to make sure that there's these authenticity and verification, and everyone is watching everyone else. So you can't just say, "Oh, let's go to mail-in ballot and let's move to online ballot and everything will be fine," it's like, no, we're pretty paranoid about voting, and there's a lot of redundancy at every step that people have to factor into this.
So what did Trump say, and why has that gotten him into hot water?
Well, Trump basically said, in so many words, "I don't want to fund the Postal Service because I don't want mail-in voting," which is a really dumb thing to say. It's a really stupid thing to say.
Now, and this is one of the questions. Yes, please.
It's. I don't know that it's election interference, but it's very easy to chalk it up as saying it's election interference. And even if it's not election interference, it's like basically saying, "I don't want people to be able to vote." It's like, no, there's, this Trump is not an intellectual. He can't make a complicated argument, in case you haven't noticed. So he says something where there might be a word of truth into it. It's like, you've missed 8 steps of the analysis, Trump. You're killing me over here. But as I have to try to say, well, what Trump really meant was, and try to explain, 8 things at once, is like, oh my God.
Well, no, I think he gets a bad rap for that. I think he can make a positive argument in the negative sense, which is to say, positively, but not I'm sorry, that was a flashback. Now
even if
yes,
what
please.
Trump says, even if what Trump says isn't interfering with elections, right? Election interference. Like, what's up with the postmaster general? Like, isn't he pretty much saying, "Hey, everyone, realistic expectations. Even if you mail it might not get in time to be counted." So I know that's kind of like a separate issue, but it all seems to be revolving around the mail-in voting thing. And I have an article up, so just because, like I said, I consume news, but I don't have all the foundational knowledge. But so the U.S. Postal Service's warning states that it cannot guarantee all ballots cast by mail for the November election will arrive in time to be counted, even if they're mailed by the state deadlines. So it seems to get more and more confusing, right? There's Trump admitting that he doesn't want mail-in voting. Yeah. There's the Postmaster General, who's a big donor of Trump, kind of running static, kicking up dust about the whole process. Like, hey, maybe you don't know how mail works. We might not be able to get them there in time for them to be counted.
What I understood the Postmaster General to mean is that states don't understand how mail works. They put in a deadline that may not reflect the Postal Service's normal ability to be able to deliver mail. It's like it depends how the state law is written, because some states say it has to be received by Election Day or whatever. So say there's a state where it says it has to be received by Election Day. And the state says, okay, if you mail it in 3 days before Election Day, that will be good enough. And the Postal Service is saying, we can't necessarily guarantee that, because that's not within our operational parameters for first-class mail. So you have set in a system where you're saying, please mail it by this date. It has to be received by this date, and we can't guarantee that under the Postal Service rules that we normally abide by. So that's what I understood the Postal Service to be meaning.
Well, I think it's just that, and so now we do have another issue. Oh God, we've got another issue. So there's a whole bunch of I'll cover that in a second. Well, and I also took that as one of the problems is what they're doing now is they're having to get rid of the machines. They have had in some instances large boosts in mail usage, because people are now starting to do more through mail instead of going in and so the usage of mail has gone up, but they've lost employees either due to sickness or just layoffs. So they are now operating really over capacity. Mail is slowing down, and now they have to get rid of these machines. And it looks like the latest $1 trillion COVID stimulus package was supposed to help fund, or at least it was supposed to, depends on who you ask, but the Dems put in money to fund the post office, and then what Trump essentially said was, hey, if they don't put that in, great, there's no mail-in voting, and I'm golden. And whereas in general, to the best of my understanding, mail-in voting could help either party. The Democrats have been sort of moving forward the most with it. One of the reasons they like mail-in voting, especially when there's like a contentious. So if when it was Hillary versus Obama in the primaries, they encouraged mail-in voting because they don't want you to change your mind. They're like, okay, if you're for Obama right now, vote.
That's another problem with mail-in voting too, is that it changes what Election Day is. With absentees aside, everyone went to vote on the same day, which means every voter, at least theoretically, has the same amount of information. because every voter has access to everything that's in the public space when they go to cast their vote. When you have mail-in voting, it means people are casting votes at different times. And so even though law says election day shall be this day, you're casting votes outside that day, and different voters have different amounts of information, which is not ideal either.
So I have a question.
I mean, it's not,
because
I don't want this to be mistaken as me saying, like, me taking a strong position one way or another. I'm just saying there are drawbacks here that have to be factored in.
Well, and you've said that for both.
Well,
I mean, you've given the drawbacks for both sides too. To be fair, I mean, you've said, look, here are the drawbacks of going in person, and here are the drawbacks of. So, there's drawbacks on both sides, and it sounds like you've been quite fair with that. So, yeah, Chris, what were you gonna say?
So I just have a question that I'm hoping the two of you can help clarify, because I genuinely don't know. So it is the case that each state sets its standards for voting, but they're working under vague federal guidelines. Is that the case?
The date?
No, it's just the election date is set by federal law, but otherwise there's no requirements beyond that.
And states can and because actually, and this is one of the things that we've actually covered before, and we're going to cover again with Landon Noel, but when we talked about what you're actually doing, probably nobody listening to this stream has ever voted for president. You voted for your states. Right. Yeah. So, and your states don't even have to honor that. So realistically speaking, but probably nobody here has ever voted for president. And the states have just agreed to honor what has been the popular vote in their state with how they distribute the electors, but they don't even have to do that, and there's no federal law saying that they have to do that. So any state can do it basically anywhere they want to. They just all have to do it on the same day. So that's one of the things that complicates this. Yes.
Well, everything complicates it, for fuck's sake, or at least it seems, right? So the reason why I was asking that is, so how set in stone are all of these deadlines, right? Because we are going to be working both at the federal and state level. So, like, I've heard it proposed, like, why don't we just have, instead of election day, we have election week to help account for all of the, special circumstances. We are in a pandemic, right? Regardless of your political affiliation, most people are home, and because of the pandemic, mail-in voting would be appropriate just because of this unique situation. So how difficult would it be to take of election day and make it potentially election week, so that these problems of mail-in ballots not getting there on time because the postal system is overwhelmed and understaffed, because it just seems like such a pragmatic solution. Hey, we want as many people to vote as possible. That is our civic duty. And, let's facilitate it. Let's remove any obstacles from that happening for this one particular occasion. How difficult is that?
I'm going to anticipate.
You definitely need an operation of law somewhere on some level.
Well, it's not. Please.
You say that one more time, Uncivil.
I was just saying that you need someone to change the law somewhere, because all these things are put in place by various laws. The federal election date is set by law. The states have their various laws in terms of the election processes that they use. So you literally need an act of Congress or your state legislature to change it, as it may be.
I see.
Well, and so, yeah, the problem is there's been a growing movement to get the federal government to step in and say, we're going to have one thing across the board. You're going to have the states rebel against that, even the states that are for, or if a Democratic president does that, even a lot of Democratic states are going to say, well, no, because we have our own unique needs and we don't necessarily want to, we need to ensure the rights of our citizens. So, and then whatever you choose has to be implemented. Somebody had said, I think, you can do either accurate, quick, or inexpensive voting. You can do any two of those. You can't do three. You can do any two: accurate, quick, or inexpensive. And so, whereas accuracy is obviously one of the first and most important things. The question is, how much money are we willing to spend to get this done to any kind of nationwide standard? And the states that have the most money to play with are going to do a better job, and the states that don't aren't going to do as good a job. And that's also why you see more disenfranchisement of and it gets to be a problem.
And for whatever it's worth, Bush versus Gore, which is kind of a garbage opinion, Bush versus Gore, it's a little bit one off, but the only like global proposition it really stands for is you can't really change the rules in the middle of the game. So you can pretty much do anything. You just have to set out the rules in advance. What happened with Bush versus Gore, at least the way the Supreme Court wrote it, which I have my problems with the way the Supreme Court wrote its opinion, for sure.
Yeah.
But the way they wrote it was that they were trying to change the rules in the middle of the game, and you can't do that. So whatever system you have, you're running out of time rapidly. I think some states are starting to vote even next month in September. So you got to worry. They're starting to print ballots. You got to worry about some of these stuff. It might be a little late at this point to change the rules.
Well, I just wanted to point out some external chats because we have people watching and they're obviously smarter than me. So Daryl, wait, who is it? I saw a really good one. Oh, Daryl Frost and Doorknob Head. Doorknob Head goes, how difficult would it be? Kind of in response to my question. And they're like, we can't even have a national voting holiday, right? So like if we can't get that done, like that seems simple compared to the thing I'm asking, right? And then Daryl backed it up by saying voting should be a holiday.
Yeah.
I think it should. Well, let me. So I had a question from Jake 4D, who often gives us a lot of super chats, which I really appreciate. Those of you who are members know that your membership was suspended on In Time a short while ago. We were demonetized. It was actually a snafu with Google AdSense. They issued a temporary repair while we tried to fix the whole thing. It finally got fixed. But for whatever reason, all our monetization settings were reset. So all of our videos, I have to go through, remonetize each individual video, and it looks like our super chats were disabled too. So I will turn those. I will turn those back on as soon as I can. I apologize. It was Google was being unhelpful until finally, for whatever reason, they decided to be helpful. Boy, did I appreciate it. But so I'll see if I can get those on. I do appreciate those of you who are trying to super chat. We'll try to get all of those questions out there.
I think one thing that needs to also be bared in mind is we need to have some assurance that what the election results are real. We need to have belief in our own election system, and any sort of changes that you make, anything that you change the status quo. It's like the status quo is the devil you know. For better or worse, it's what you know and you're willing to accept. And anything you change, you have to wonder how that impacts people's perceived legitimacy of the election. So, there might be a whole bunch of reasons to expand mail-in voting. Maybe there's a good reason to do that. Maybe there's lots of good reasons to do that. Maybe it's something we should do. But when you're trying to do it last minute, because at this point you are kind of trying to do it last minute, just taking a look at the calendar. When you're trying to do it last minute, at the back of the envelope, people are going to scream foul, and they have a reason to scream foul because you're trying to change the rules when things are already kind of underway. And maybe there's an exception that should be made. Maybe there's reasons we should bend the rules. But, you have to be worried, at least I think you should be worried that, people will perceive the election as illegitimate. People perceive the last election as illegitimate. It's like, do you really need to add any more chaos to that? There's lots of concerns there to be had. So, nothing is free over here. As my role as a conservative is try to bring caution to the zeal of the moment. Here's a lot of reasons to change things. Okay, like here's a lot of reasons not to change things. Because here's a whole lot of ways that things can go to hell. That's my role in life.
Well, so let me. I want to put a cap on this. Actually, at the one last. Did Trump either deliberately or not deliberately, obviously I don't think he'd do it deliberately. Did he maybe mark himself down for election voter suppression? Is that because that's what it sounds like he was copying to?
I don't think he violated the law, but it was a stupid thing politically. But
all right.
I don't think there's a legal violation because I think he can say, like, we shouldn't fund the Postal Service. It's an opinion, right? So I was like, and here's a reason we shouldn't do it. All right, well, fine.
Well, yeah, the reason is I don't want people voting, but okay.
It's a stupid reason, but yeah.
All right, Ed, we now should have super chats back on. Yeah.
Trump's not known for nuance, right? Like even when he had the travel ban, he was trying to make it not seem like it wasn't Muslims. He just kept slipping up and putting like Muslims into the things that he was saying about the travel ban, or like the things that he does that he's trying to pretend it's not the thing that everyone else thinks it is. He usually
he finds a way.
He says it out loud, like he says the quiet part out loud. Like, oh yeah, the Muslim ban. No, you please, Mr. President, stop calling it that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, we're not banning Muslims. We're only banning people who believe in Allah. Yeah.
From the shithole country.
Oh, Jesus, I totally forgot. It's amazing how much has happened in the last. Yep.
I know. We have forgotten. Yeah, we have forgotten more bullshit from Trump than any other human can get into. You know, like, it's just ridiculous, the fucking shit, every day. Pardon my language, by the way. I'm really cursing tonight.
No, that's
fuck you.
Wow. Thanks for coming on Civil Law. I'm sorry that you're not going to come back. I can't say I don't blame you at this point. I mean,
he's the one I like in this hangout.
Well,
what are you talking about?
Well, thank you, Ethan. Thank you, Ethan. You know, I'm going to make sure.
New and improved.
Ethan 2.0. All right, so there's two other please.
Ethan in every way.
Oh,
better than the other Ethan in every way.
Yeah, we're not gonna let him see that. I may drop that. Yes, I just got them working, so we should have now super chats up. So I do appreciate your, and again, I apologize for the technical issues. There's been a whole host of things, so we'll get that order. In fact, we're going to have on so Wednesday the 19th, we have on a show. We got some hippie jazz or some bassist or I don't know on the 19th. What is music? I don't. Jesus. What is music? So Christopher Motti will be joining us for What is Music. We're also going to have on Sock Account is going to be coming on to discuss we actually have two shows with him. I'm curious to know which one he wants to do first, but we're going to discuss a little bit about the history of the political the political, not the sort of the labels we use. So what does it really mean to be a conservative? What does it mean to be a liberal? Why does neoliberal mean what that means? Because in modern sense, it makes no sense. But if you take a look at sort of what the history of what conservatism really meant when the term was first coined, it's not understood the same way it is today, and so he's going to be covering that with us, and he's also going to be covering what are the ethical implications of different kinds of political systems, not only in terms of political views like a conservative or liberal, but also systems that favor freedom more versus ones that offer, and I want to say, I was going to use the word tyranny. I don't think that was the word I was looking for, but more authoritarian and maybe even a benevolent authority, but a authority.
Yeah.
If you could live under a benevolent authority, yeah, I think on civil law knows where we're going with this, because this is an interesting thing that we don't discuss often.
The best form of government is a benevolent king. The problem is when you get the non-benevolent king.
They die.
Right? So
yeah, that's right. Christopher's got it. They don't stick around forever, and when they're gone. Yep. So we're going to be discussing that, and I think
unless you're in North Korea, I guess, because then they stay around, and then because they're technically their leader is dead, because it's the current leader's grandfather, Kim Il Sung, or
Kim Il Sul.
Technically the leader
Il Sul, yeah.
Is still technically the leader of Korea.
Yep.
For some reason.
Actually, he's not anymore. His son finally he was the leader of the party, and his son is finally. No, his son just consolidated it. His son consolidated it about 2 years ago. He changed it. He's been consolidating power, but wow. So, all right. So the other two things that I wanted to discuss. One, let's talk a little bit about. I think if I recall, he had 5 points in his executive order. So because there was a failure, which. Oh, dear Lord, I don't know who could possibly have predicted that there would be a failure between the Democrats and the Republicans to come to consensus on a $1 trillion spending package. But there was a failure. They didn't do it, and so Trump came out with, if I recall, an executive order that had 5 points to it. Were any of these did any of these points have teeth? Were they overstepping in any way? What do we know about these points on civil law?
Is Nate still trying to join? If so, he can have my slot if you want, because I have other things I need to do.
Oh, okay. Well, if he's last I saw, he was actually still in the live chat. So what I could do is also what I could do is if you end up going, I can I'll drop him the link.
Let Nate. Let's hear from a much better lawyer, Nate the lawyer.
I don't. You don't give yourself enough credit there. But thank you very much. Thank you for coming by. Would look forward to having you again soon. We really do appreciate it. I apologize for the technical difficulties. We'll drop Nate the link, and we'll see you again soon. I hope.
All right, thanks, man.
All right, bye.
It was good chatting with you, Uncivil.
So yeah. So what I'm going to do is now that he's left, actually, it's going to be very easy to. What I'm going to do is, Nate, if you're still there, I'm going to hit Nate up in the Discord and get him this link, and he should have no trouble getting in. And
right, while you do that, I'll vamp just a little bit. So, towards these orders that you're talking about, so from the naive perspective, from the things that I've read, they, from my perspective, because I still don't know how legit they are as executive orders, they seemed like Trump's attempt at being a peacemaker, bridge building, olive branch toting peacemaker of some sort, right? It's like, oh, well, they want 6 and they want 2. I'm going to say 4. Bam, executive order. And it seemed like everything else Trump does, superficial and cheap, and didn't have any teeth in it. And the complaint about it, as I understand, is that it was more of a photo opportunity for the optics than it was anything substantial. So I think that if my understanding is correct, that seems to be the problem with it. Like, he put forth some executive orders, and they might not be able to be implemented in any way, shape, or form, which raises the question, why the fuck did he do it? Why was it such a public thing? If not, then for him just to look good in this desperate election that he's desperately going to hopefully lose.
Hold on one second here. I haven't done a deep dive into it, but what I understand, from what I understand, most of it, a couple of it had to do with taxation, and he wanted to do a personal income tax holiday for people making under $100,000 a year. I'm not necessarily against tax breaks, especially for that tax bracket, but I'm not sure that now is the time. I think there are other ways to be using that money, and I do think Congress passing a package would be preferable to just throwing tax breaks at people. Having said that, it's unclear as to whether or not he can even do that, and I think he probably can't do that. Congress is certainly pushing back on that. He also ostensibly extended the moratorium on home foreclosures. This is extraordinarily important because what we're looking at now is a number of people. It was last month, I think, there was a record 31% of people, or 31% of renters or homeowners failed to pay their mortgage or rent in full. 31%. That's a record number. We have a lot of people who are going to be facing getting kicked out. Right now, according to the Aspen Institute, 40 million Americans could lose their homes as a result of the current eviction predictions based on people not being able to pay their mortgage. That is 12% of the U.S. population facing losing their homes as a result of this. Now, Trump said, quote, "We are stopping evictions. We're not letting people become evicted." However, the executive order doesn't stop them. It doesn't even delay them. So as of August, people can now start evicting people from homes again, or mortgage companies or management companies can start evicting people again. And what he's essentially done is sort of made a recommendation, but that recommendation isn't binding, and he probably could have done a full moratorium, and in fact basically said that it's our policy that there should be a moratorium and people shouldn't be evicted. But he hasn't actually specified how that's going to be done. So most people seem to think that one is kind of toothless. The other thing that he did was that any government loans, what's the word I'm looking for? The government education loans for people who are paying to get through college, he has issued an extension on those loans so that students can have a much longer time to pay them back, and that's marvelous. I think that's wonderful. But it only affects people who have 100% of their loan through the U.S. government. So that's actually less than 10% of all student loans. So about 10% of student loans have had a forgiveness on paying back some of those loans. But and civil law super chat, $5 from civil law super chat life. Thank you so much on civil law. You are a gentleman, sir. Thank you very much, and thank you again for coming on. I do appreciate you doing that in spite of the issues. And I'm going to make one more attempt at getting Nate here. Hold on one second. Nope. And yeah, there's always wow. Technology is just giving me a hard time today. Yeah, please.
Oh yeah, I mean, it takes a computer to really screw something up, right?
Yeah.
So I have a U.S. News and World Report article up, just kind of going over these executive orders, and the payroll tax one is one that I'm super curious to know more about, because if I remember correctly, he actually said that if he's reelected, he's going to do away with payroll taxes completely. In which case, like, where do taxes come from? Where does the government get money if it just gets rid of payroll taxes forever?
Well, payroll
doesn't seem to make sense.
Yeah, well, payroll taxes represent a very small portion of. So let me just try to think. Okay, now I got to get into my tax frame of mind. The U.S. government gets. No, it is. It's large. Well, it's income tax. Most of the U.S. In fact, the U.S. can only tax income. So now, if he by payroll tax. I'm not sure. Payroll tax may be a separate thing. We need somebody who knows more. This is what we need Agrippa for.
Yeah, that's.
Yeah.
We need people smarter than us. God damn it.
Yep. Well, that's why we had Nate here, but then he just which I screwed that up. We just weren't prepared to have, which is my bad. So we'll get the system set up. So let me move on in the hopes that Nate will join us for that. And cover one piece of news that is. And I did want to discuss, and we'll wait for Nate on this. Kamala Harris and Biden. Does Kamala Harris solve any of his problems? Ostensibly, one reason why he's really wanted a female is because it solves some of his the perception of his difficulties with women. She's definitely a very strong woman. She has.
But she's another coaster. This is a rare ticket where both the president and vice presidential candidate are coasters. Usually, when the presidential candidate is a coaster, they pick somebody from the Midwest so that the whole United States is represented. Because regardless of whether you're East or West Coast, you're still considered the category of super liberal, right? You need somebody from the flyover states. Obama was Chicago, Biden was the coast, right? That's just how it worked. Reagan was California, and Bush was Texas. So it's against received wisdom. Like, what are they going to do to pick up all those flyover state votes?
I think what they're hoping is that because Kamala Harris has one thing that most other coasters don't have, which is she's been a prosecutor, and she's been very tough on crime. Most of the complaints of her when she was in the primaries was she's been too tough on crime. For Democrats and for liberals, she was. It's just sort of like, hey, you're prosecuting all these people who may have been innocent, and it looks like they. And I think that actually plays much better to a number of the crowd that they're seeking. So I think that's what they're hoping. I think they're hoping that they're hoping that she helps him solidify the minority vote and the female vote. And the reality is, in most cases, and this is one of the problems with the two-party system. We've had this discussion before. This would be another great discussion we need to have. But what would be the advantages if we became a three-party system? I've always said I would actually vote for Trump if he were running third party, and there was any reason to believe that my vote could help him crack that third party window where the third party we became a three-party country. I would do it. It would be worth that, for even regardless of what would happen. It would be worth that. But that aside. we are a two-party nation, and each party gets at any given time, each party has roughly 40% of the vote, 45% of the vote. So they're not fighting for the other party's 45% of the vote. That's already lost. They've lost what's over there. They're fighting. Right. They're fighting for the moderates in the middle.
You have to win over the undecideds. You have to win over the moderates and the undecideds, and so it's. And this is where the calculus doesn't make sense for me. Are they trying to say that because Kamala is a woman of color, women are already a pretty strong voting bloc, as I understand it, but people of color, if they can up those numbers, then that looks great for the Democrats. Are they thinking that they can up those numbers enough that it'll overcome the fact that poor white people in flyover states that are undecided, you know what I mean, aren't? How are they going to charm them?
I think a huge part of, I think they're also taking COVID into account, and they're saying that, look, there's going to be a lot of disincentives towards voting. Who really wants to go outside? Who's going to want to wait in these long lines? Who's going to want to risk getting sick? So it's a question of getting, in many cases, it's going to be a question in their view of energizing their own base and hoping that people who are Trump supporters aren't so energized by Trump and aren't so, hey, we love Trump and we want another 4 years of this. They may be for him, but not enough to go to the polls. So if they can find a way to make their ticket more, now for doing that, actually Bernie might have been better. So there's been an argument made that Bernie, but at this point, he's had a couple of heart attacks, and so you've got Biden, who's getting up there in years, and you've got Bernie, I think there were issues there. And this is another one I wish we had on Ethan for this, because Ethan could blow the two of us away with one lobe tied behind his back in regards to his knowledge of this stuff. So at some point we'll discuss this with him. But I think the two goals that they're trying to do is to energize reasonably, energize the voting population that might otherwise be really thinking of not voting, and that's usually the disenfranchised, the sort of the downtrodden, who are saying, they're going like, my vote doesn't count anyway, and trying to hit those moderates. And the thing that she's got with the moderates is she is a law and order person more than any other person on the left. She's not as much on as many of the people on the right, but boy, does she beat anybody on the left with that. She was a kick-ass. She wasn't a district attorney. Was she an attorney general? Somebody in the live chat's gonna do that. Jake D, $4 super chat. Thank you, Jake. It's amazing how much was screwed up today. And I sincerely, once again, bottom of my heart, apologies to everyone. We will get that sorted out by the time we have on that fluffy what is woo show. We're all going to get in touch with our inner spirit animal. I don't know what he's got planned. I don't know what he's going to do. All right, so $10 from Jake D. We need a national voting holiday where no individuals are allowed to work more than. Agreed, absolutely agreed, and that's okay. We want to fix elections in the U.S. We have to get rid of the Electoral College. You can't because it's in the Constitution, but you can make it null and void essentially by forcing states to delegate electors based on the popular vote. So once they do that, then the Electoral College is worthless. That's the first thing you need to do. Second thing you need to do, you have to have a third party. So long as we don't have a third party, you are constantly going to be getting greater and greater polarization between the two parties, because a two-party system inherently is divisive and is designed to impede compromise and to create this ever escalating kind of game of chicken. Both cars are driving towards the cliff, and you see who stops last. Right now, if you're homosexual in the United States, you don't have a lot of options. Let's say you're gay and you're pro-life. You're going to have to pick which of those values is more important to you. You're going to have to pick whether your identity or your ethical standards are more important, because you can't vote both easily. There's the log cabin Republicans. I'm sorry, they have no power, and it's just, you're not going to get anything done. So, I realize I'm behind on that. Yeah, please
back a little bit, because I mean, again, and this is pushback from a naive perspective, but of the listening that I do and based on the understanding that I have, I've heard arguments against two-party systems based on countries that have multiple parties, because the logic is, even though you're not starting with two parties, you always end with two parties. So regardless of how many parties are in the mix when it begins, by the time you bottleneck to election day, it's two parties. So there's that, and again, I don't know enough about it to determine whether it's a defeater argument in any way, shape, or form. But the electoral college, I wanted to push back a little bit too, because if they got rid of that, campaigning would change dramatically. No Democrats would ever need to go into flyover states, right? They would just have to. They would just have to campaign in the most heavily populated states and just shred them.
There is a lot of truth to that. I think what you would end up, however, is, once again, you still have like Ohio, Florida, Michigan. These are states that have typically basically decided elections. And I think the demographics are going to shift and move. It's not always been those states. It's not always going to be those states. The Overton window, so to speak, on which ones are really relevant, I think is going to continue to shift. But I do think it does disincentivize campaigning. And, why are you going to go to Rhode Island? They've got three votes. They've got 3 electoral votes. Why are you going to go to Rhode Island? You're going to go to California, you're going to go to.
And then why would anyone in Rhode Island vote if no presidential candidate is coming to them to greet them, let them get to know them? You know what I mean? Like, what's going to happen to voting for the states that don't get campaigned because they're not heavily populated?
But I think the first thing is you're assuming that the elections aren't going to be very close, and especially our most recent elections have been close. And I think because they're going to be close, you are going to want to try to get Rhode Island. Now, you're not going to spend as much time in Rhode Island as California, but then again, there aren't as many people in Rhode Island, and there aren't as they may have issues that, of course, are important to them, but that's what the state is for. In terms of as a country, they are still part of a country, and as a president, you represent Rhode Island nationally. You don't represent Rhode Island as the state. That's what their government is for. So if they have issues with their own state, their government should be paying 100% attention to them. The president of the United States should be paying the same amount of attention to each person in Rhode Island as each person in California, and so on and so forth. Right now, California gets California. If you're in California, your vote counts. I think it was something like 1/1000th as much as a Rhode Islander's vote for president. Same vote, but based on how many electors are assigned to the number of people you have, the vote counts a lot more in Rhode Island, and it's explicitly to make up for the problem that you're using. But it seems undemocratic that depending on the state you're in, your vote could count more than people in another one. I think if you just sort of let them play the entire country, which becomes a lot easier when you don't have some states that apportion proportionately and some states that are a winner take all. That's how you can get people who can win the electoral college but lose the popular vote, because they win by just a narrow margin in a winner take all state, so they get all of those electors. Well, now you've just invalidated half the other states that are proportionate, which is another reason why you make states want to become all winner take all, which is also phenomenally less fair, but it incentivizes the people spending the candidates spending more time courting you in that state. So I think what you're saying is a bit of a problem. I think it's less of a problem because hopefully the president would be speaking to all people regardless of the state anyway. And while states have some issues, that's what they got senators for, and that's what they got congressmen for. The president is supposed to be representing all of us. And I think he's more inclined to do that if everybody's vote counted identically. But I live in an all-red state.
So when are we going to have the discussion? When are we going to have the discussion about splitting the United States up into 5 countries?
It's already 12 countries.
It's already 12?
I believe it's 12. Actually, maybe 8. Hold on, let me look it up. Oh, you're going to love this. You are actually going to like this.
What's this? So somebody's already done the math on this?
Somebody's already done the math. Okay, it's 11. It's 11. This is, and I will try to drop this in or maybe Tony Designs can do that. According to Business Insider, there was a study done. The United States of America is actually 11 nations when you talk about culturally. New France, the Midlands, the First Nation, the Far West, Greater Appalachia, Yankton, New Netherlands, New Netherland, Deep South, El Norte, and the left coast. And they cover what each of these different quote countries value and how they operate culturally. So, for example, in New Netherlands and New York, it's a very materialistic culture. They value education. They in Deep South, they value what was it? I'm gonna have to do this one from memory because I haven't found it yet. In the Deep South, okay, they value they deeply oppose government regulation. They're suspicious of government. Where in Yankdom, they tend to be more trusting of government. Deep South also, let's see. Oh, El Norte, dominant Hispanic culture, values individualism. And left coast, let's see. And then they talk about what areas were colonized by the Spanish, the French, the Dutch, the English, and how that affected their culture. So it's the Business Insider. The United States is actually 11 countries, and it goes through culturally the 11 distinct countries that make up the United States. And I thought it was kind of BS, and I read it. I was like, you know what? Having been around most of this country, I think they really hit the nail on the head. So it's an interesting article. I hope you guys will check it out.
I love the thought experiment of being 5 different countries, because then the head of that portion of the country could really be in touch with the needs of that part of the country in a way that, like, you know, East and West coasters just aren't going to have as much of a fuck to give about agriculture.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You with me on that?
Yeah.
Well, my wife just chimed up.
Oh, Jesus. Oh, that's just so I have to pay her like the $50 like guest appearance fee, right? Now she's all of a sudden I gotta. Oh, dear Lord.
Oh, hold on a second.
A union pay.
Fee?
Yes.
No. I'm sorry, you're breaking up.
Oh. Wow, the wind is in the voice of Nick somehow.
It's the radio frequency on this thing. There appears to be interference. I'm sorry, I haven't heard a thing you said. Normally everything you say goes. Right. Yeah, well. Just to be fair, and I want to make this clear because Chris and I are good friends, so I want everyone to understand that what I really mean is normally when he talks, it goes in one ear out the other. Now I'm just like trying to find another way to just like say I didn't even hear it at all. Normally I just ignore it. I hear it, but it's just what? I don't give a shit. Fuck you. All right.
There it is.
All right. There. Yeah. All right. So. Let's cover. I think one more thing that I'd like to cover, which is just going to be depressing as all fucking hell, but we have to cover.
COVID? You're talking about the COVID?
Yeah, I'm talking about the COVID. So right now, the estimated number of deaths in the United States from COVID is 147,000, which is a lot, and that is since it started here in this country late last year. The New York Times has come out with an article saying that number is off, and it's actually 70% higher.
It's 70%. I heard it was 30% higher.
No, well, that's what I've done the math wrong. You and I had spoken. It's 70% higher.
Gotcha.
So what it is they're saying that actually it has exceeded 200,000 already, and that is just the deaths since March. So what they have done is as follows. And we talked about this before, that there are a lot of problems with how we calculate the COVID deaths. Right now, it's just if you have a test result and it's positive, that's a COVID death. So if somebody dies, they test their body. If it's got COVID death.
Not all bodies are tested, so they have to use a model.
Well, they're not. The CDC isn't using a model. It's just going based on the tests. So the problem is, since we're not testing all bodies, that's right. They only test the ones where they suspect it. So the question is, how many times do they not suspect it and it's COVID? If somebody has diabetes and they get very, very sick and die, but it looks like diabetes, what if it was actually COVID? And since diabetes is comorbidity with COVID, they missed the COVID death and said it as diabetes. The other thing that we've talked about too is the secondary deaths. So if you need a regular treatment at a hospital, at a full hospital. If you need to go into a hospital once a month for dialysis, and that hospital gets completely overrun, we had talked about this before, at least 2 counties, or the biggest county in Texas, Last year, the longest wait time for any ambulance waiting for an ER, so they had somebody dying in the back and they're waiting to get into the ER. The longest wait time last year was 30 minutes. That was the record wait time, 30 minutes. It is now averaging 10 to 12 hours for an ambulance with a patient in the back dying who needs the ER right now. That's how long they're waiting, which also means that the EMTs are getting COVID because they're stuck in a confined space with somebody who's dying of COVID. So and I think that's a lot of those numbers also they're strictly COVID with no underlying conditions. So the question is when it's the underlying condition. And admittedly, you can't say that somebody who dies of kidney failure because or not kidney failure. So if somebody needs dialysis, they go into dialysis, let's say once a month. If that hospital gets overwhelmed, there are counties in Texas right now that are completely overwhelmed. They have shut down. Their ICUs are at 100 or more % capacity. What ends up happening is you get redirected to a different county. In some cases, they can't do it. So if you need dialysis and you can't go anywhere else, you die because you couldn't get that dialysis. In some cases, the U.S., a industrialized nation, has been reduced to a third world country. Our medical system's been reduced to a third world country. It's so overwhelmed. So if you die from something that otherwise could have been treated, it's not counted as a COVID death, and it shouldn't be in terms of the mortality rates for COVID. It doesn't make COVID any more deadlier. But when COVID overwhelms the society, you have to take that into account when you consider the damage of reopening. So, and that's something that hasn't been done. So what New York Times did was this. They calculated what the death rates have been in every state in the country and for the entire country as a whole. And based on the previous death rates, what you could expect for this year. They then measured what the death rates have actually been for this year from March all the way up through end of July. So it doesn't even include August. And what they found was the difference between the expected and the actual death rates in the entire country is over 200,000. So more than 200,000 people have died over what you would have expected if nothing was going wrong. Now, we have here a couple of charts.
With the caveat that people are driving less and driving accidents account for 30 to 40,000 deaths a year reliably.
Yes.
So even with that number down, our death numbers are up.
So those predictions, those original predictions included, for example, actually it's about I think it's 42,000 people a year die on our highways. 42,000. This is one of the safest years on our highways in like 15 years. People aren't dying on our freeways right now because people aren't going into work I'll have to look into that. So those numbers have gone down, and even with those numbers going down, yep, you got it, Chris. We have now over 200,000 deaths, not since this thing started, just from March through July. Now, the red is what it is over expectations. So expectations would be the baseline of the number of deaths they were expecting in that state. The red is how many deaths they actually got. And as you can see, and what you see in these numbers is as COVID numbers increase, obviously you get an increase in these deaths, and these deaths are proportionate to the number of COVID cases. So the resulting conclusion that the New York Times has reached is that they have a strong degree of confidence in saying that these numbers are almost exclusively COVID-related deaths. So it's really quite shocking, and what it suggests is now you can't take everything into account with this. Again, some of this is other comorbidity things, other comorbidity factors, but what it seems to demonstrate is now, again, since the U.S. has reported 147,000 deaths since COVID started, this is 200,000 deaths since March. That's a difference that's a 70% increase over what the U.S. is reporting. That's a staggering change in the numbers, and it's unfortunate. Yes, please.
I was just going to say, what makes it difficult is, these are like honest mistakes. We don't know. I don't think that because this is such a novel experience, I don't think that people just, even the CDC, health experts or whatever, have their head wrapped around likely to collect this descriptive data, right? Because you and I were talking about this earlier today, and I brought up, like, what about suicides? Suicide rates have exploded. How can you not say that those are COVID related, even though the people might not be COVID positive, right? So then that just brings that into question. So the umbrella question just seems to be, what are the criteria to be included as a COVID death? Is it because you actually have the disease? Is it because you've been tested to have the disease? Or could it be based on circumstances, like not having access to your dialysis machine, the suicide rate, or anything like that? Like what fits in that category? What are the criteria? And I don't think mental health experts have their head wrapped around it either.
Well, I think that's, oh God, no. Okay, where's the mute button?
We got some smart opinions happening right over here. I'm just saying. We might have found the smartest person in the room.
Sure we have, frankly. Between the two of us, yes, probably. I think that's not a tough sell. Well, and I mean, that's true too. Alcohol abuse has gone up. Domestic violence has gone up. One of the scary things about domestic violence is we know domestic violence has gone up because hospital incidents have gone up. Reports of domestic violence have plummeted. The reason is because people who are in domestic violence situations aren't necessarily reporting their spouse, but they're also not going outside, so there aren't friends who are saying, hey, where did you get that black eye? Same thing, especially with child abuse. Instances of child abuse have been going up. The way we know is in Texas, just in the first week of the lockdown, I don't know the current numbers, but in the first week of the lockdown, child abuse cases reported to Texas hospitals because children were coming in went up 300%. But reports from schools about suspected cases of child abuse, from babysitters, from anybody who would come in and check on children, that dropped roughly 70%. So you're getting fewer reporting and much more instances of this kind of abuse. So there are other things so I think that's a very fair point. So it's very difficult to know what these numbers mean. What we are seeing, at least in my view here, by looking at this, is that we already have this narrative, and I had spoken with somebody actually earlier who was talking to someone who said that COVID is fake. And there's still people who sit there and say it's fake, and one reason is phenomenally poor leadership in this country. We don't have a president who's every day wearing a mask and coming out and saying this is real, this is real, this is real. And for the 100th press conference, this is real, in case there's one person in Timbuktu who didn't actually know that it was real. By the way, it's real. So we have this narrative of, hey, conspiracy theorists, and conspiracy theories are always self-aggrandizing, so we enjoy them. And we have people who say that this isn't serious, or who still think that more people are dying in car accidents than this. These numbers are very, very bad. And unfortunately, COVID is still growing across the country. We exceeded, several weeks ago, 1,000 deaths a day. So keep in mind, at 1,000 deaths a day, of course, that's 365 deaths a year, 365,000 deaths a year. So these numbers are going to be awfully optimistic compared to that reasonably soon. So, yeah, it's we've been trying to sit down. A lot of people have been trying to sit down and figure out what the actual mortality rates are for these numbers. And we don't know yet. A lot of times you can't tell till after the pandemic. We can tell by some countries, but we found that different countries too do seem to have different rates based on a number of different factors. And there appears to be some racial factors involved too. So that
it's
complicates things.
The idea that COVID is fake, I think, is a little bit more ubiquitous than even I want to admit. I mean, Shanna has stories. Shanna has stories because she's working front line. She's fucking healthcare worker. She meets people every day that come in and are just like, because if she works in orthopedics, so if they need a surgery, just like any other place for surgery, you need to get tested for COVID. She gets pushback from her patients, like at least half of them that go for surgery, about getting a COVID test. Oh, do I have to? We have to wear these masks and they don't do anything. And, fucking kudos to my wife, because they're just like, these masks don't do anything, blah, blah, blah. And so she'll just kind of like remove hers and be like, I see 100 patients a day. I am more than likely an asymptomatic carrier of COVID. Do you really want me to not wear my mask? They shut the fuck up like that. Yeah, doing this for you.
That's ballsy.
You know what I mean?
That's ballsy. Yeah.
It happened once in public, didn't it?
Yeah, at Dick's Sporting Goods.
At Dick's Sporting Goods in public, some people were not wearing a mask, and
Well, it's not that they weren't. It was
what was the
because
deal?
we were standing in line.
Yeah.
And they had like the 6.
Can you hear this?
I can, yes. They were standing in line and they had the 6.
Good, perfect. Yeah,
Oh wow, good, nice mic, baby.
that's what I'm talking about.
Ooh. So we're standing in line.
All
They
right,
had,
cool
like,
at you two. I don't want to hear about his mic. This is a PG program, but please continue.
Are you sure you don't want to hear about it?
Yes, oh boy, you have no idea how short.
You're not wrong. You're not wrong.
Best Saturday night ever.
All right, so let's finish that story because I do want to hear the story.
They're 6 feet apart, blah blah blah, and there's a family of like 5 or 6 people, one barely adult and a bunch of teenagers and children with her, and they're getting too close. And I turn around and I said something like, excuse me, could you back up a little bit? And the mother or the adult, she kind of gave me a little attitude. She, sucked her teeth and looked me up and down. So I took my mask off because they had their masks down too. So I took my mask off and said, I'm wearing this for you because I absolutely have been exposed to COVID-19 because I work with patients all day. And it was like the Red Sea parting. Like that was the end of that. And I think that's the second time. Isn't it the second time I've done that in public? And then when we see people walking in stores, I had the kids go, Mommy, why aren't they wearing masks? Or I'll get away from those people.
Or if we're in Target with the kids and there are people in Target not wearing a mask, we say as loud as we can, "Walk over here, kids. Stay away from those people. Stay away from those people over there."
Oh, those people.
We just say it as broadcast. Yeah, we're horror shows. No fucks to give.
God.
But
My life's in danger. I'm going to reciprocate. Like I'm going to repay you in kind.
Yeah. So all of that to say, the idea COVID isn't a real thing is unfortunately way more ubiquitous than you'd think. Now, I'm in the state of Pennsylvania, right? And I'm in Lancaster. So Lancaster is close enough to Philly to be like metropolitan-ish.
Right.
But we have a river, the Susquehanna River, that separates us from essentially Pennsatucky. Right. And my wife works across that river. So this is her demographic of her patients.
Like these people are.
Yes. So, and for those of you not familiar with Pennsylvania, the joke is, you have Philly on one side, you have Pittsburgh on the other, and the rest is Kentucky or Pennsatucky, more appropriately. So, yeah, that's super unfortunate that, it's bad enough to see people not wearing masks, and not social distancing and stuff. It's even worse knowing that the reason why they're not doing that is because they're seeing actual safety precautions as a political signaling of something, and some of them just don't believe that COVID is actually a thing.
Complete nonsense, because like we were saying earlier, you wear a shirt in the store, you wear your shoes in the store, and you put your seatbelt on, but you won't put a mask on. Like the logic just breaks down at the most convenient point for these people.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, and that's been my new threat. Like if we go into a Target and we see somebody not wearing a mask, and when we go to management and we're just like, "Hey, isn't it policy for them to wear a mask?" And they're like, "Oh, there's not much we can do. I'm just gonna take my shirt off."
All right.
Just, okay, cool.
Me too.
Right? It's just a policy, right? They can disobey it. What's the diff?
They say the cognitive dissonance is the
no fucks to give.
Yeah.
No fucks to give.
They say cognitive dissonance is the feeling you get when you have two contradictory ideas in your head. I both really want to go watch that and just see you do that. I mean, just like, I'm here. I figure I'll pay cash just to sit and watch. And then the other half of me that's just like, I really, that sounds a little cringe. I don't know. I want to see that, dude.
It's absolutely cringy. God forbid everyone pulling out their phones. Why is this guy not having a shirt in Target? And me all screaming.
Oh,
fucking Dago, shirtless Dago screaming in Target. Everyone's worst nightmare.
Well, I've missed a few. I've missed a few super chats on civil law. $2. Susan Rice would have made a much better pick. Actually, I think he's probably right about that. I really, I don't like. I don't like having to agree with him. I just don't. It's just principles. He's conservative,
it's
so 5D, yeah, but the problem is he's a smart guy, so you end up kind of, if you don't really know what you're talking about, you're going to get hosed with him because he's good. Super chat, $5 from Jake D. If you're the smartest person in the room, you are in the wrong room. Well, that I think Neil deGrasse Tyson said something along those lines, which I always really liked, and I think that's actually it's a really good observation. All right, so thank you, Jake D, for the super. Thank you guys all for again putting up with everything. And listen, I said this earlier. Nate Brody was originally scheduled for this, and I really enjoy having him on. He's a great guest, and it was just technical difficulties, and we couldn't have on everybody at the same time. We'll get it sorted out for next time. We're going to have him back on. So those of you who are here to see him, he's a good friend of the show, and we really appreciate having him on. And he had me on just as a surprise, last week, which was just great. I just enjoy streaming with him. So. We'll don't tell him I said that because I got to bust his chops. But we'll get that sorted out, and we will have him back. Another $5 super chat from Jake 4D. Thank you so much, Jake. True death can only be known by charting the overall deaths of the world. That's the problem is, and I've seen people too. I mean, I did dive into this for a little while, which is the one problem that you do have is right now the way they measure. The mortality rate is the number of people who have died from it versus the number of people who have or have had it. But the problem is the people who have it, their cases aren't resolved yet. They may die, they may live. You don't know. If the mortality rate is just to use an even number, let's say it's 10%. So many people get this so quickly over such a rapid period of time that you could, because it's a logarithmic progression, you could end up with 1 million people, and they all have it, but because they haven't reached the end of the cycle of whether they're going to live or die with it yet, they're all considered to be alive. It's considered not to have killed any of them, even though it will kill 10% of them in the future. And then when you take the total number of people that had it in the prior 2 weeks, let's say it's 1,000 because of logarithmic progression. I know I'm chopping up some numbers there. So what you're going to get is a 1/10 mortality rate when really it's 10%. So that's 2 full orders of magnitude off. Now, again, those are very choppy numbers, but that's why people don't like to use the what are called open cases model. People like to use the closed, not people. Okay, doctors who know what they're doing like to use the open cases model, and the reason is there are some genuine benefits to it. There are other people who like to use the closed cases model. I kind of like it more, but it's got a lot of drawbacks too. But the closed cases model means you only count people who either survived it or died from it, one of the two. The case is resolved either way. They either recovered or they died. And you use that for mortality rates. But that's got drawbacks to it. So in the end, usually it's not considered that you can get an accurate mortality rate until about a year or two afterwards. So I think Jake 4D, I think you got it. I think that's usually how doctors say. We've had on Sygart, he's talked about that with us before. We'll have him back on again to discuss it. But I think, that's why it's so hard to tell. You just don't know. And Chris brought up a whole bunch of reasons why even these numbers, which I like, and I think they're the most realistic numbers we've had so far. They don't include the driving deaths, but they also include suicides and a whole bunch of other things. So it's circumstances have changed so dramatically, but I think we can all agree. I can't say this. My view is it is worse than the 147,000. The numbers are much worse. What they actually are, nobody knows, but I think they're worse. And also, let's not brush by the fact that the reason why this is so important isn't just to let us know, like, hey, this is how many people died. It's not a factoid that lives in a vacuum, right? It is the benchmark by which we determine how well we're doing in trying to, ramp this thing down. So if we can't have accurate numbers in real time or a nimble enough system to keep up with what's happening, then how are we going to know how well any state is doing? You know what I mean? Because we could look at the COVID cases, but some people are going to argue that the COVID cases are going to increase with more testing. Well, if the deaths increase with the cases, then you can no longer use the argument that it's just testing. How do you rule out that argument without having accurate fucking mortality numbers? Yep. So, well, and how do you know? How do you know when to reopen? How do you know how much you're going to reopen?
200,000.
you can't make any good decisions. You don't know when to reopen, how much to reopen. You don't know whether, my state has started reopening and now it's rolling that back. And my concern was, and this show broadcast as the states were talking about reopening, and we're looking at the numbers, and from my perspective, and I think from the perspective of the doctors that we had on to discuss it, that was a very bad idea, because we looked at the numbers and we said, this is it. And understanding these numbers is extraordinarily important, because this isn't something to clown around with. And there are also people who have some idea of the numbers too. And when they say too, it's like the highway deaths. No, it's not the highway deaths. It's just not highway deaths. A lot fewer people have been dying on our highways every year. And I mean, when we take a look at, okay, so somebody came up with this, and I'm doing this off the top of my head. Okay, so I think it's got to be worldwide. It's the equivalent of 150 Boeing 747s crashing every day. 150 Boeing 747s crashing every day. Imagine what we would do if that I mean, we'd sit there and say, I don't care what it does to commerce. We're not going to fly planes until we solve this problem. Nobody would sit there and say the economy. Nobody would do that. Would shut down the airports. Would shut down. Yeah. All right. Well, and then I think there was one more. $4.99 from Timmy S. Thank you, Timmy S. And thank you again. Also, Jake 4D for all your super chats. Timmy S. My line. Yep. It's all fake. It's a worldwide conspiracy to get you to cover that ugly mug. Consider plastic surgery. Yeah, I love it. Yeah, that's a good one. That's a good one. All right. Well, I think we're going to be wrapping up soon. Chris, is there anything you want to plug? Any shows you're going to be doing soon? Anything that you wanted to talk about? You're going to be coming on.
Fact,
Please.
This is a rare occasion where I actually have some things coming up. So,
wonderful.
So I lecture. And my summer semester ended just this past Wednesday. I handed in grades on Friday. So I have a little bit of time to dedicate to my Discord and doing some hangs. Excuse me. So on Monday, I'm going to be having a hang with you, Kyle, Curtis, and Ethan Prolib. And we're going to be talking about, why should I trust you? Right? It's more like a meta conversation about conversations, because I think
I don't have an answer to that one yet, but okay. I don't have an answer. I haven't figured out how
you're going to like it, brother.
Yeah, I know what your answer is, dude. This is why I'm wondering why I'm there, except just to get. Yeah. Okay. Fair enough.
But I think that these conversations are good touchstones, because anyone who is online kind of has to have some criteria about whether they're just having frequent interactions with people or actually making social ties. And if you're choosing to make social ties, there needs to be a way for you to assess trustworthiness, right? So I've come back on the scene kind of recently, and I've met you, I've met Ethan, I've met Kyle. Why should I trust any of you? So we're going to have a discussion about what are the criteria that we use both consciously and potentially unconsciously, right, as we kind of post hoc analyze how we got to where we are. So I'm looking forward to that. That's on Monday on my channel at 8 p.m. Eastern time. And then on Wednesday, I'm going to do the What is Music with you. And, even though you're busting my chops, I'm happy to accept it. But I'm a musician. I also taught a course called Psychology of Music. So I have some fun musical demonstration examples to explain what music is and why it's so emotionally evocative. And I think that's it as far as actually planned things. Yeah.
Nice.
So,
we'll try to get you to drop into a few other shows too, and maybe next time I'll actually be prepared ahead of time. Oh, all right. Well, thank you all very much. Hold on one second. Thank you all very much for joining us, and we will. I'm going to go pop into the Discord after this for a little while. So anyone who wants to catch up and chat with me, or just talk with anyone else, anyone who just wants to, we'll do a little hang there for a little while. And
if anybody wants to, anybody in side chat that kind of wants to take us to task on anything that we said, we'll be in Discord for a little bit, so you can come at us.
Yep, sounds good. So let me now, like I said, it's just amazing how much here got sort of reorganized. So if you all could just give me one second. Yeah, okay, that doesn't matter. All right, well, thank you all very much. We'll be in the Discord in probably about 2 minutes, and yeah, that link is being dropped right now, as is a link to Chris Mowdy's channel. I'll be there Monday. Chris will be back on this show on Wednesday, and hopefully we'll have both Nate and Uncivil Law again reasonably soon. Thank you all for joining us.